Let's kind of review for a moment a kind of theme that's working through the room, and you might be maybe at a little time, a little lunch, another centering in the silence. You may be a little restless with Merton at this point. He may sound a little too rambunctious or too something kind of wrong with him. Maybe I'm not sure what you're thinking. I want to assure you that he experienced quite a lot of problems, and I'm going to refer to a couple of them and kind of breakthroughs that he made in the 50s in dealing with these. It wasn't an easy road for him, but we began today in thinking about the need to see clearly. In contemplation, almost always, for so many writers, and for those of us experiencing it, there's a kind of visual metaphor. There's something about seeing what you're saying, seeing what you're thinking, seeing what you're believing, seeing the road ahead of you. Something about sight and the problem of blindness it just permeates our faith, our tradition. Seeing the road clearly for Merton was seeing reality, but never the whole gamut. It was just seeing something real in a world that was by and large kind of fake or false or not complete or not open, or however we could kind of think of it. And so this led him to be very concerned about being attentive to whatever was real and to see clearly what is real. That attention, he started to realize, was a troubled kind of thing because of what he had to break through in seeing, that there was something that clouded his vision, his understanding, his experience, and almost always it was himself. So we're always in the way of ourselves in experiencing what is the closest thing to ourselves and the very reason for our existence as a self, which we call God, the life of our life. Merton experienced a lot of struggle in breaking through himself, and we're going to kind of deal with this a little bit today, even to the point of realizing that he's a human being, because when he became a monk, he began to kind of think almost otherworldly of himself. And it was a breakthrough for him when he realized that he was a human being like every other human being, that he was not something different, this monk creature. He was actually this fuller kind of human being. This was an amazing thing for him. It opened up the entire world in a completely new way, and I'll come to that in a little bit. So he's trying to see clearly, he's trying to be attentive, something inside of him that he's not really been prepared and grounded or oriented for, he's experiencing. Somehow our experience of the world that we live in is experienced not somewhere out there, but it's experienced inside of ourselves. This is a beautiful mystery. It's a paradox that my experience of everyone and everything outside of me is not experienced outside of me. It's experienced inside of me. It's almost as if everything outside, if you could, is this making any sense, or am I just, ooh, he's getting kind of loony now. When I talk to my wife is inside of me. My kids are inside of me. When I talk to students just doing my job, not talking about spiritual things, they're outside, I can see, they're distant from me. But somehow there's an identification that occurs in me. So if I'm trying to help a student understand something, they're asking me a question, I don't merely sympathize. I'm not putting myself as a model. I'm saying this is work. I don't sense that I have some answer that I throw at them. Somehow I have to take the question in myself. Somehow I have to understand what they understand. Somehow I have to puzzle about what they're puzzling. It has to be inside of me as well as outside of me. Later in Merton's last year, he was giving some talks in Asian countries, and he had a beautiful line in one of his talks where he said, "Brothers, we are already one, but we think we're not. We're already in communion with each other, with God, with reality." And he's talking to people who are not necessarily even Christians. But we think we're not. What confuses us? What breaks us off? What distances us? What cuts us off from others? What makes our inside seem like it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on outside in the world? Merton didn't really believe that it was all apart, that we're all separated and we're trying to connect. We're really all united and we're trying to understand that, affirm that, and somehow we're even trying to express that communion through our life, the life of our life pulsating, communicating itself through us. So somehow the interior of ourselves has everything to do with the interior of reality, the interior of other people. Not psychologically what's going through their head necessarily, but somehow the life that is in them is shared with the life that is in us. And he slowly began to really not just perceive it, but to experience it. And so he says, if I can flip to this, I don't know if I can find it quickly, I didn't mark it. But it's a beautiful line in here. I've got it memorized, so I don't even need the book. But I'd like to, here it is, I'd like to look at it again. He says, my life is a listening. This is in Thoughts in Solitude again. My life is a listening. And he's writing this in midway point in his monastic life. His life is a listening. And then he says, his is a speaking. This is the rhythm he starts to understand. He's a monk, he's trying to be quiet, he's trying to hear God, he's trying to find out who he is. He has to be quiet, he has to hear something. He doesn't know what he's going to hear. So he has to be open, he has to be attentive. He has to be spiritually sensitive to whatever. These are what he called seeds of contemplation. They're floating, like dandelion seeds through the air, those whirly-bird helicopters, we call them, in maple trees that, spin and rotate as going down. Seeds of contemplation are flying everywhere. Pay attention to all of these. You never know when one of these seeds it just opens up the entire world. Is this not what William Blake said? You can see the whole world in a grain of sand. This was his master's thesis. He already understood this before he became a Catholic. He's already realizing that the whole world is inside the smallest thing, like a mustard seed, or like oneself. So my life is a listening. His is a speaking. My salvation is to hear and respond. To me, that's the rhythm of contemplation and action. Contemplation is receiving the life that I already am, but I'm imbued with it. That thing is just coming through me, and I'm going to keep living. I have to face my death because that's part of my living. I have to face the realities of work and family and social issues. Merton comes to understand that as contemplative activity, not contemplation set apart from the world that's a mess, but contemplation right in the heart of things. Because if there's any place where we need to be receiving God, it's right in the heart of what we're calling the real world, where we get messes and problems. So my salvation is to hear and respond. For this, my life must be silent. Hence, my silence is my salvation. I don't know why I didn't put this on the handout. This is a better quote than maybe some of the other ones. It is a perfect quote, but this whole book, you can't sit this down and read this in one sitting or a couple months or a year. You read a page like this and you have to put it down. Cornel West will often talk about books. He's an African-American philosopher, also a Christian, and he'll talk about when you're reading a book and it starts to get inside your soul and it starts to do havoc with you. It's turning your life upside down. This is the upheaval that Merton's talking about. And he says you have to put that book down. You can't take it. You can't take anymore. You got to throw the book against the wall. It's just too much. It's just too much. Well, that's kind of, to me, that's like going to the ocean, going into the forest. I mean, when you start to come into to a sense of the communion, the fullness of life, which is what Christ promised us. It just is too much. Just a little dab will do. You remember that from the, was that a 60s commercial? Dippity Doodah or something. What was that? Was it what? Dippity Doo? Yeah, not Dippity Doodah. That was something else. But Brill cream. Okay, so you guys go back a little bit. Okay. There was something else. Women didn't. I thought men used Brill cream. What did women unscrew the little jar top that had? It's like bubbly. Was that Dippity Doo? Okay. And there's Slinky, and we could go on. But that's not our real life. But that's part of it. That's part of it. That's part of the fun. Now let's go to this Merton quote for a moment. No, let's don't. Let's look back at his life, and let me tell you about two events that are really key, and then let's look at what he says about silence and try to regather some things here. I think I want to move off of those monastic years and turn the page over to the other side of that Merton chronology, section 3. We'll kind of work from there, the final 2 conferences this afternoon, when Merton kind of turns toward the world. What is beautiful to kind of start to see, if you don't already know this about Merton, is one of the draws that he is for us seems to be because he is, was that me? It was, I'm just sensitive. I don't want to cause any problems, and I'm always scared I'm going to. Merton doesn't have any grounding. Remember, he loses his family, no church upbringing, doesn't have any direction, orientation. Just kind of lost in the world. This is kind of the way we are until we have some type of conversion, and then we make a turn, and then we enter something. This is a classic mystical stages if you study the mystical way. Purgation, leaving the world, withdrawing from the commotion, however we could look at it, and then you go into the illuminative stage when your insides are opened up and things are bright. And then there's a third stage where you come out of solitude and you come back into, you reemerge in relations with others in your life. It's like you have to leave yourself. You have to die to yourself. And then you find yourself. And then somehow you have to find the way to live the way you are. It's the second birth. It's another baptism. We're familiar with this trajectory. Well, Merton's life exemplifies this perfectly. He's in the world lost, and then he finds his place, and then he loses his place. And then he has to learn how to live in this place. And he learns how to live there, behind walls, and he is reopened to the entire world that he left. He wanted to be a writer. He quit. He wasn't going to write anymore. And then they told him to write. And then they told him to write stuff that he had never planned to write. And he wrote stuff he had no idea was in him. And he literally affected people all over the world. But he learned to engage that world through his writing, which he had no plans to do. And so it's kind of like you have to die to yourself. You take on a new role, a new life, maybe even a new name. But it's your real name. This is what you're supposed to do. He wanted to be a writer, and that was his plan for his life. God had another plan. He did not see it. He went with it. Didn't have much to go on, but he followed it. But that happened to be what he was supposed to do. But he didn't know it ahead of time. And we're all kind of in that boat. We've still got years ahead of us. But even when we die and we pass from whatever we're in, we are promised and assured that this just keeps on going. So the more we can realize as much as we can here, I mean, our contemplation is going to be perfected when we get to heaven. And heaven might just be this again. I don't know what it's good. I have no idea. But I'm open to something way beyond me, and it's not a distant thought or concept. It is something that I can sense inside of me now. I'm already in this livingness that just keeps going. We saw in the 50s, Merton is pretty quiet. He's recovered the Cistercian tradition. He's discovered the Desert Fathers. He's discovered the patristics. He's getting the theology that he never had. He's reading everything. He's reading everybody. He was a voracious reader, and he's making notes. He made methodical notes like crazy. Out of these notes came these books, his thoughts as his world opened up. But he was a very bookish person. But he knew it wasn't in books. Whatever he was getting, it wasn't in the book. The book was this way to tap into something else.